Good morning, Caribbean. I am Kimberly Ramkalawan and we are coming from Paramaribo, Suriname. We are here just some time ahead of the start of the 43rd regular meeting of the Heads of Government of CARICOM. And currently several heads of state and dignitaries are making their way to the capital city, where they are here to discuss several matters of Caribbean importance. And one of them said to be visiting Suriname is the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Here to give us an idea and discuss the UN's involvement in CARICOM's Heads of Government meeting is UN Resident Coordinator for Suriname, Mr. Dennis Zulu. Welcome. Thanks for joining us here.
Thank you so much. My pleasure to be here.
Now tell me a bit about the agenda, CARICOM's agenda, and how it's your involvement, the UN's involvement in this year's meeting meets the UN's Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay. So thank you so much for having me. And I think it's for all of us in the UN, it's a delightful day today because, as you correctly stated, the Secretary General will be visiting and participating in the Heads of State meeting. The first meeting that is participating at the Heads of State level. But you might wish to know that the UN works very well and quite strategically at the programmatic and political levels with the CARICOM Secretariat, but also as member states of CARICOM. This one is particularly special because the Secretary General himself is coming to attend the Heads of State meeting at the invitation of CARICOM. So for us, it's also is important because then it illustrates and highlights the importance that the UN attaches to the relationship with CARICOM.
Are there any particular areas that the UN would like to see addressed at this year's meeting with particular urgency?
Well, of course, I think the topic at the moment is that of climate change, and you can see the impact of climate change in the Caribbean. The Caribbean remains very vulnerable to the effects of climate change. In fact, only a few days ago, as you know, we had a cyclone alert. So in the UN, we've been working with CARICOM member states and governments to see how we can support greater resilience at the country and the regional level, and how the region can cope with usually the devastating effects of cyclones and hurricanes, but also other issues like we had recently in St. Vincent with a volcano. So our role really and our commitment is to show that we work with CARICOM to ensure that the countries become more resilient, but also to put in measures that will facilitate eco-friendly ways of production, but also eco-friendly ways of living, so that we can all live in an environment which is also very good for all of us.
Can you elaborate a little more on some of the sustainable development goals that you think are of particular interest to Suriname and even the Caribbean islands?
Well, I'd say all of them are important because they're all interlinked, right? So, for instance, if you're talking at poverty is something that we all want to address. But that's linked, that's SDG 1, that's also linked to SDG 8 on employment and economic growth, which is very important. But as you know, the Caribbean has not been doing very well in that area because of COVID, but we also know in certain parts of the Caribbean, even prior to COVID, the economies were not doing too well. Actually, the anticipated growth rate is not that good as we sort of come out of COVID. So for us, it's important that we work with member states to see how strategies and programs can put in place to facilitate economic growth. So hopefully when we have people working, where people in livelihoods generating activities, this can also impact on their and reducing poverty levels in the Caribbean. Another very important SDG is that one on education. And you know, education has been impacted quite severely by COVID, with a lot of children not being able to go to school for up to 2 years. So how then do we ensure that we accelerate the progress towards the achievement of the SDG? You want to know that, for instance, because of COVID, all the progress that have been made has, to a great extent, been reversed because of that. So the UN, in fact, in September this year is holding a Transforming Education Summit in New York, which will bring together the member states to come and see how, working together, we can try and accelerate progress towards the attainment of the education goal. So for us, it's all the SDGs that are important. But then how do we ensure that, given the shocks that we have had in the past few years, we can work collectively and accelerate progress and regain the progress that we were making before that? But I'm also wish to mention and take the opportunity the fact that we're in Suriname, that Suriname went ahead to do a voluntary national review of the SDGs. And basically this is voluntary, and a country or a member state can decide on its own to see how well it's doing in terms of its progress towards the SDGs. And we want to commend Suriname for doing that, because that gives us a clear picture as where we should be going and where we need to improve on. And this report that Suriname did will be presented to the high-level meeting being held in New York not very far from now.
Tell me a bit about where you see the CARICOM as a whole in moving forward in achieving these goals. Have they gone far? I know there's been some setback because of the pandemic, but how do you see them progressing?
Well, I mean, this is why CARICOM as a collective is important, because member states can work with each other to try and learn from each other, but also collaborate. I mean, the whole essence of CARICOM is regional integration. How do we benefit from a larger collection of countries? How do we learn from each other? How do we move or collaborate in certain areas so that we move towards that? So the whole principle and philosophy of having regional groupings like CARICOM is really see how each one of the countries can bring something to the table so that they collectively benefit. So we see that as a great initiative, and therefore the Secretary General will be here to render the support and see how the UN can further integrate and work with CARICOM.
Now, Secretary General Guterres is coming here to Suriname. Tell me a bit about the significance of this visit to the United Nations, particularly Suriname.
Well, it's very significant, as I said, because it's not very often that you see the Secretary General coming down to this part of the world. He was only recently in Barbados, which was also a very good moment for us in the UN, but now he's here in Suriname, not just to attend the summit, but also to see what's going on in terms of UN collaboration with the government and other partners in Suriname. You may wish to know that the UN only a few weeks ago signed the country implementation plan, which really is a blueprint for collaboration between the United Nations team in Suriname with the government and other partners in Suriname. So for us, that's an indication of commitment on the part of the government and the people of Suriname to partner with us in the United Nations to move forward towards the same goals we're talking about together. How do we support each other? How do we collaborate going forward?
Now, Mr. Zulu, if you can give me an idea a bit about the schedule that Mr. Guterres will be here participating, some of the events that he will be partaking in. If you could just give us an idea of his visit. What's it going to be like?
All right. So yes, he's here to attend the Heads of State meeting, so he'll be attending the official opening. But he has a fairly packed program because we also want him to see Suriname. So he'll be visiting some UN government and projects in Paramaribo and outlining areas, really to get a feel of what sort of work the UN is doing in partnership with the government and other stakeholders. So he's going to do that tomorrow, and he's also meeting the president and the senior ministers and other government officials of Suriname, really on a bilateral way to ensure that we also speak, because Suriname obviously is hosting us, so we need to thank Suriname for its generosity, but also to strengthen UN-Suriname partnerships and the relationship which we've had with Suriname for a very long time now. So he will be visiting various projects run by UN agencies, but also engaging in discussions, bilateral discussions with senior government officials and other partners that we work with in Suriname.
Thank you for sharing that with us, and we hope that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres enjoys the Caribbean warmth and he feels welcome here at Suriname.
I'm sure he will. Yeah,
thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
We want to thank you for joining us here for another episode of Good Morning Caribbean.